Friends of Turek Books, I'm coming to your town if you live in the U.S. New York City, first of all, June 21st. Get tickets now, don't wait. I know I'm bland and boring on the podcast, but on stage, I'm bland and boring in a funny way. I've been doing a bunch of stand-up around Tucson, getting ready for the tour. It's been going great. Been having so much fun with the crowds. I'd love it if you became a part of that. New York City, you're my first one. Let's go. Tickets at Rodney's. Philly, Chicago, Dallas, LA, San Diego, Seattle, Portland, Eureka, Kansas City, Tulsa, and I'm adding more dates hopefully soon. So follow my bands in town. You just need a Spotify and it'll let you right in there. And then you could follow along all kinds of artists whose live performances you may or may not want to see, but may want to see because you wouldn't follow the ones you don't want to see. Anyway, enough about me. I did release a new poetry book. First edition signed copies are available on my website, joshuaturek.com. Now enough about me. How about my sister? She's our guest this week on Turek Books. We had a lot of fun talking. My sister Britt, she moved to Tucson right around the same time I did. She's a musician, a writer, a handy woman. She's done it all. She's good at all of it. And I had a lot of fun talking to her in this context. So thanks so much for tuning in, and let's get going on the episode after you buy tickets to the show. And people in places where I don't have shows, send me messages on where I should. Okay, really, we're starting now. Welcome to Turek Books Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm your host, Joshua Turek. We're never going to read all the books we want, but when someone tells us about a book, that's its own valid form of experiencing it. Our guests come in to talk about the books that left lasting marks on them as readers, and that becomes a springboard to who they are, who I am, and maybe who all of us are. So sit back, relax, and enjoy it, and who knows, maybe you'll end up grabbing a book or two. Maybe you've read some of them, and it's nice to hear someone else talk about them. We want this to be like a book club, but without the guilt. Thank you so much for tuning into another episode of Turek Books. We have a very special guest today. She's a music maker, an artist, an author, a poet, and also my sister, Britt Warner.
Hello, hello. Happy to be here.
How you doing?
Fabulous.
Well, here we are in my back room doing a podcast about books.
In Tucson, Arizona.
Yeah. We've had thousands of conversations in our lives. Never have we recorded one.
Or have we?
Or have you?
Have I?
I would guess you have.
I am the archivist.
Yeah, that makes sense.
In my mind.
But yeah, I'm really excited to have you. I'm curious about the books you brought. I know you're a reader. I know you go through your phases. Is that right?
Yeah, what do you mean phases?
I feel like there's phases where you haven't read for periods of time. You're like, yeah, I'm just actively not reading. You also wrote a novella.
I did.
So that we'll probably get to, but you're just a prolific writer. You're always writing, whether it's songs.
Yeah.
You've written so many albums of your own. Britt's songs have been in all kinds of movies and commercials and TV shows and trailers and video games. Will Smith movie trailer.
Yeah.
And
it's true. A Burberry holiday campaign as well. That was exciting.
Yeah, that one was really cool.
Yeah, I have a daily practice. I wake up every morning and I write 3 pages. It can be total garbage, does not matter. I started a practice during the pandemic of writing every single night before bed, just to help me clear things out and stay connected to reality. And yeah, I love to write. I do love to read as well. I'll go through phases where if I'm very active in the world, it becomes harder to just slow down and drop into a book.
100%.
Yeah.
In what way? Like, because your motor's just running too hot?
Yeah, my motor starts running high. I do find that I can be a little extreme in life. So if I'm throwing myself all into like carpentry, for instance, then I'm just going and going and going in the physical realm, and I might write, but find it harder to be in somebody else's world.
Yeah.
Maybe that's more it, of like there are just periods where I want to be in my own world and not get drawn into someone else's. And then a time when I know it's time to refill that well.
Exactly. There's times for outputting as a creative person, inputting, and sometimes it's difficult to be both out and in.
Do you ever go through those phases where you're
Yeah.
not into reading as much?
Definitely. And I think it does center around like intense spells of writing when you're just you're like, so you're living whatever that piece is you're working on. And you also feel happiest in that piece that you're in. And so, yeah, you don't really want to taint it like two cocktails, it's like you're in that one.
Music's the same way, actually. So if I'm like deep into a project of writing songs, I don't want to listen to other people's music. And I know so many other artists who are like that too.
Yeah. But then, I think as I get older, I like to have a lot of different voices in my head. And I'm aware that like nothing we do is singular. It's all coming from so many different directions. I had a guest on, she said everything you've read and stuff, it like ferments in you. And so, yeah, how that then awakens at a different time or if it remains dormant forever. I'm kind of more open to having competing voices, and not just competing, but conversations between all the different voices going on, whether it's, I'm deep in a book here, working on a writing thing here, and watching The Sopranos here. It's like,
what's Tony saying in your head these days?
I remember when The Sopranos came out. That's the only time I watched it prior to right now. We were watching it like as a family every Sunday.
Wait, were we?
Yeah, we were like teenagers and like hopping on the couch and watching The Sopranos, at least like the first couple seasons. I don't think we made it all the way. But watching it now, I'm just struck by how much funnier it is, how reflective it was of the upcoming conditions that we're living in. It was like this precursor to things starting to kind of get nasty around the edges of even just the like mainstream view of the world. And also James Gandolfini is just so captivating. And like I love his like physicality, the way he looks in a wife beater. I love his like receding hairline, and
he's a bear.
Yeah, he's a bear, and he's just so there with it. And then I looked him up, and I can't believe he died at 51. I was thinking I was like I was younger when it happened, so I was like, he's like older, but 51.
Well, because you're 40 now.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, no, that is a
too far
young
away.
man.
He was just a baby.
A baby died.
Yeah,
and it's always
tragic.
a tragedy when a baby dies. But yeah, it seems like he lived hard. And there's actually a biography about him that came out this week, so I think I might get into that. But what about you? What have you been reading these days? What are you drawn to in this current moment?
Well, interestingly, since moving to Tucson, I find myself drawn to LA literature. So one of the books I brought is Slow Days, Fast Company by Eve Babitz, which you lent me, and so I'm actually just returning this book to you.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that doesn't happen often.
No, I'm pretty good about returning books.
Yeah, you are. You finished this book.
Yes, and then I started reading it again.
Okay.
So I got to the last chapter for the second time and thought, I don't need to go there.
What did you think about it?
First of all, she comes across as a dick, but unapologetically, which is very special to me. I love when women can just own their brashness to some extent. She's insecure. Like, she'll be dating a man and accuse him of wanting to sleep with their sister, or accuse him of wanting to sleep with her friend. So there is that insecurity, but she also owns up to being, quote unquote, 15 pounds overweight compared to everyone else, while still acknowledging that people look at her and just see sex. Like, she exudes that quality. And so much so that she ends up with this man who is gay. Her boyfriend throughout the book is a gay man named Sean. And one of her friends questions her at some point and says, hey, you two are hanging out together all the time. What is that about? Like, he's gay. And Eve replies, well, he's not that gay. And clearly not, but it's also like a testament to how hot this woman was that she actually turned a gay man straight.
Straight enough.
Straight
To
enough.
be
Straight
happy,
enough to have
to
a
get
good
along.
time.
Well, it also, hearing you say that, it speaks so much to like the outer life reflecting the inner life, and in LA of being like this very vanity driven place, having to reconcile yourself to how you're perceived in a way that like I don't think other places are as like that.
It's a very self-conscious place, like cripplingly
Just like
so.
holding up a mirror to yourself the entire time,
But
but
a
not like your
distorted
internal
mirror.
world. Yeah, like a funhouse mirror. And yeah, I mean, even reflecting on her weight or her,
A battle with pasta, a lifelong battle with pasta, she
yeah.
describes it.
Well, and that's what I remember from her. She's really good at writing about food.
She loves food, and she describes cooking herself an omelet one night and filling it with this creamy cheese. She said, like, making yourself a good meal at home instead of going out is the same as washing your car in LA, because as soon as you do that, it's going to rain. And as soon as you stay in one night and commit to that and make yourself this fat omelet, just, oozing with cheese, the guy that you really like is going to call and ask you out to dinner. And that's what happened.
Yeah, I love that. There's like this book out now. It's like Didion versus Babitz. And I think they
I
were
want to
like
read that.
frenemies and kind of rivals. And Didion, I think, staked a larger claim in the literary world, was taken a little more seriously as like a, writer, journalist, essayist. But as time has gone on, it feels like there's been this cultural reader turn, especially among like, the hip readers toward Eve Babitz, and she seems a little more like playful.
She has a Mae West quality to her on the page, even if that's not the reality of who she was. She owns her sexuality and she lets herself emote. She's messy in a way that Joan Didion seemed terrified to allow herself to be. She was like constantly just reining it in. And I really like Joan Didion's writing, but it always feels dissociated to me in a way that she's just kind of floating above her body.
A cool remove.
Yeah, cool remove. She's afraid to let herself feel that much. Describing like her relationship with her late daughter. Her daughter said, "You always seemed a bit removed or aloof or something like that. And I wish you had been, more like warmer or something."
And that's reflected in her writing.
That's
And yet she
reflected in her writing,
because of that dispassionate remove, she sees things for what they are, and a greater sensitivity than a lot of people, because she's not invested in putting her own ego into it in a certain sense. Yeah, they're both great writers, and it's silly to
it's apples and oranges.
Yeah, and you don't want to make a
fair.
competition out of them, but it's just this idea of like they are contemporaries, and it's fun to reflect on our culture and on what we enjoy reading through those two, because there are so many similarities yet differences, and of LA,
California in general, yeah. And describing like what's going on in the culture at the time and how that affects their writing and the way the landscape appears. And so it's like in this book, Eve Babitz is talking about Chavez, and I think in the White Album, Joan Didion was talking about the drought, and both of them are talking about labor issues and strikes and low pay. And it's just like, do you want the party girl version, or do you want like the really like
the professor?
Yeah.
That's exactly.
But I love the way Eve Babitz talks about the light in this book and the jacarandas and the landscape itself. She describes the sunset in the rear view as this big orange bat. Like something like that. It brings me back to my own experience of growing up in LA, and I relate to that. And so being in Tucson, I just feel like this tiny bit of nostalgia pulled to nature, the light, the jacarandas.
It's cool you leave a place that you've lived most of your life and then reflect on it now that you're not immersed in it. And it sounds like that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I remember she wrote something about body surfing that was really vivid too, that like really takes you to just swimming in the ocean and catching waves. I think as a teenager going down to Santa Monica Beach and doing that. And yeah, she wrote about the taquitos down on Olivera Street in such a way that like it was just so, yeah, like just a very casual, but great writer. Yeah.
What did you like about that book?
I just like the taquitos and the body surfing, and I'm not even sure it was that
I don't
book.
think it was in that book.
Yeah,
Maybe it was Eve's Hollywood.
Yeah, maybe.
Which I haven't read.
Yeah, that one was good too. So you're being drawn to the place you just left as a means of reflecting on it, as a means of missing it. Because Britt and I both moved to Tucson
around the same time.
Yeah, around the same time.
Following the fires in LA.
Yeah, we camped out here, and then I was talking Britt into moving here for various reasons.
A couple years ago, actually, you brought it up.
Yeah, I did. And then finally was listening to myself, and I'm like, oh, I should actually do it too. We live close to each other. We walk our dogs together.
It's very sweet.
Yeah, it's cool. This place, we are still working hard, but it does otherwise have a pretty slowed down pace. But yeah, I'm curious about what else you brought in book-wise.
The other thing I brought was a book you gave me called Some New Kind of Kick by Kid Congo Powers. I'd been over here on your birthday for brunch, and we had a couple of friends come over, and one of them gifted you this book, and you had just bought it for yourself the day prior. So you gave me the copy that you bought. This is a memoir that starts out in LA in a similar era to the Eve Babitz book, but two very different trajectories. He is or was a queer Chicano kid from East LA, but he has lived in Tucson for a few years with his partner Ryan. So while I was reading this book, one of my new friends invited me to a tortoise coming out party, which is basically like a desert tortoise hibernates until it gets really, really hot. And then it comes out of its little earthen hut to eat.
Out in the nature?
No, you can adopt them here.
Oh, got it.
So this girl had adopted.
And she knows when it's going to come out?
Approximately, based on the time of year and what the sun is doing. So a bunch of us gathered in her backyard, and she's growing herbs, and she has this little hut that she constructed for Juliet, her tortoise. And we're all bringing offerings to the mouth of the cave, like leaving carrots and various things, Easter peeps and stuff.
What did you bring?
I brought tortilla chips and dip for the guests.
Nice.
I didn't bring anything for Juliet.
Okay.
So who should come to the party but this person and his partner, Ryan? And they introduced themselves to me, and we were chatting, and they were so sweet. And I didn't say, hey, I'm reading about you right now, because I clammed up and got self-conscious and didn't want to be weird. But basically, he was a huge music fan, started a fan club for the Ramones to help them become more known because he so believed in their music, and ended up becoming like friends with them a little bit and hanging out with them and driving them to shows and photo shoots and stuff when they came to LA. And then he was standing in line one night to go see an unrelated show, and he met this other kid who was the president of the Blondie fan club. And that guy came over and was like, oh, hey, it's you, blah, blah, blah. Let's start a band together. Meanwhile, Kid Congo Powers had never played an instrument before. So slowly he starts learning guitar in order to be in a band that eventually becomes the Gun Club, which is a very famous band. And then from there, played with the Cramps, and eventually Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. So I really like this memoir. One of the difficulties I found was that he had so many friends. I could not keep track of all of the characters, like this rotating cast of characters. Got into drugs, got into heroin, was in and out of that.
I don't want to read a music memoir where they don't.
I mean, that's why I'll never write one,
There we go. Yeah, I love rock. I love musician memoirs. They live these lives that the rest of us are trying to not take to such extremes. And when I say, yeah, it's not every musician, but a lot of the ones who do, especially of a certain era when drugs were a little less scary. It was a little more adolescent almost, the idea of how they were living and, out of the public eye. There wasn't social media. There wasn't even a huge media apparatus to catch them in all their bad. I think that might be the mark of a good memoir, is that it's raw enough and you're getting inside a person's head enough that when you meet them, you don't want to bring up that you read it because it's a vulnerability that would suddenly occur between you and them. Is that right?
Sure.
What stopped you from saying, hey, I'm reading your book right now?
I don't know.
Because how often do people meet the people they're reading about in real time?
I think it was just so surprising.
Yeah.
That I didn't know what to say and I didn't want to make him feel uncomfortable.
Right.
I didn't know if it would make him feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, then you're like at this tortoise coming out party, and meanwhile he's like, why are you looking at me and not the tortoise hut? He catches you glancing at him. He's like, she knows I did heroin. Can't I just go somewhere where people aren't looking at me like I was in the gun club? This was supposed to be about the tortoise.
It was supposed to be about the tortoise, exactly. It wasn't supposed to be about his sordid past.
It would just be almost too random. You're like in Tucson of all places, and you're like, hey, I'm reading about you. I don't think I would have mentioned it.
He was asking me about myself and like how I knew the host and where I was from. He was like being engaging. And so there was certainly a window and I didn't take it.
Yeah, I think that's fine. It's not, I mean, what would have happened?
Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing.
It's like, I met him, I came here a couple of years ago and saw him perform, thought he was cool. And he's friends with our mutual friends. So when we were staying with them during the fires, I saw that book and they told me about it. They said it's really good. So I finally picked it up and then, they
gave friends told you about it.
Yeah, Christian and Patsy. And then they gave me the book on my birthday, the day after I bought it. And I read it and I enjoyed it too. It was like a mellow memoir. There was sadness. There were life events that were extreme to some degrees, but it wasn't like grippingly, I don't know, destitute, or like he didn't get into the details that really made you, like I'm reading Steve Jones's memoir, who was the guitarist in the Sex Pistols, and he had that independent radio show in LA all those years.
I loved
Jonesy's
his show.
Jukebox.
Jonesy's Jukebox. Yeah.
Real Cockney accent. And he writes with the Cockney accent too.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, and he starts you off with some pretty gnarly childhood stuff. And you feel like, yeah, this is like a gnarly book. Like I read Keith Richards' memoir, which is, see, I have all my music memoirs on that shelf.
Oh, yeah.
Gathering together. And his was like, yeah, and then I threw a knife at a guy. And you're just like, that sticks with you. Whereas the Kid Congo Powers memoir, yeah, I think what sticks with me is like he was this gay teenager at a time where being out was a little more difficult, but it didn't seem like it really stopped him from just totally being immersed in this music scene that he just was like magnetized to.
And he found a scene where he could come out and not announce it. It was kind of just like, well, yeah, everybody's queer in this scene and everyone's a punk and an outsider.
And the music is the main character.
Yeah.
And if you're like into the music and then the fashion that comes with it, like it seems like that's what got you into the club.
And interestingly, eventually punk becomes so mainstream that it's just an army of people wearing the same exact outfit, and then it's not punk anymore.
Yeah.
It's like, it's safe.
Yeah.
And so you have to do something else. But I think that's the impressive thing, is he had started out thinking he was just going to be a journalist, not just, but that was the path that he was going to go down. And then was pulled down this other path. And I wonder if there are callings that are like that, where fate or what have you just decides for you and says, no, you're not seeing this. You're such a big music fan because you're destined to be a musician and to have your own thing.
Yeah, and actually then last night I went and I saw him perform. So, yeah, it seems like I think we're stalking him.
I think we are.
But yeah, I saw him perform last night. It was really fun. There were a lot of old dudes and dudettes in the crowd. And being, I'm 40. I think the crowd was even older, kind of Gen X. There was maybe one person under 30. I feel like people under 30 should have been allowed in free at the show just to encourage a little ecosystem. But yeah, it was interesting being in a music show. I haven't been to one in a while. And at my age and seeing a bunch of people my age and older, bobbing their heads. It's loud. Seeing musicians who are my age or older on stage. And it's really fun, really inspiring. And you're seeing the evolution of these musicians who have dedicated their lives to the music. But B, I also kind of couldn't help but reflecting on other people in the crowd and thinking this person was doing the same thing 20 years ago next to me at a show. And it felt very much like a blink of an eye moment. I'm like, we're all just taking in a show like you do, except we're old.
All this life
and
is
if someone
past
saw
now.
this show, Siobhan was like, I wanted to take a picture, but in front of me was just a bunch of balding men. So if I posted it, it's like, am I
Just
really
all
at
the
a cool
crowns.
spot? Like, look at this cool indie spot.
That is
but
cool.
It is cool.
It
But
is.
it's just like, the initial impulse to post an Instagram, we're going back 15 years now. It's like,
but we're not young and sexy anymore.
yeah, exactly. It's like,
we're old and sexy.
we're old and sexy. And just that shift is like a little jarring when, it comes out of nowhere on you. But yeah, it was fun. It was packed. It was loud. The musicianship was cool. He'd take a back seat to the other singer and just jam. Yeah, it was fun. And yeah, we walked there. It was a piece of cake.
That's awesome.
And,
Wooden Tooth.
Yeah, Wooden Tooth Records downtown.
Did you get any anxiety?
Yeah, I don't love going to performances anymore.
Yeah.
I do perform. I recognize that people have a lot of fun at shows. But my attention span's shot. I don't like standing for that long.
No.
The
low back just can't take it.
Yeah, and I'm tall too, so I've always been self-conscious at shows that I'm in someone's way. But yeah, I honestly don't think I've never been to a transcendent music show, and I know I'm in the minority. But yeah, I don't love seeing live music.
I get a lot of anxiety. I get hypervigilant in crowds, and then sometimes I just wish that I was up there singing as well.
And maybe that's part of it too, is the
Yeah.
performer in me is like, no, I do my own thing already. I get my energy from these live things in a different way. But it's limiting, and there's a lot to be had by forcing yourself out of your comfort zone and going to a gathering and taking it in, like we were talking about earlier. Input, output.
Mm-hmm.
And what an egomaniacal thing to be like,
It's
I
just
should be
all
on
how-
that stage.
Yeah, I know.
It's like that Eartha Kitt song I heard. He sang a good song. You know that one? Killing Me Softly.
Yeah.
Except it's not Killing Me Softly with his song. It's like
My
your
song.
own song.
Well, okay, I know this
I
isn't
heard
about
he
a
sang
book.
a good song, but I could sing an even better one.
Please let me come up and
Killing
sing.
me softly
Please
because
get
I
away
should
from
be
that mic.
killing. I should be killing them harder. Yeah. Sorry,
was-
what were you gonna say?
I went to a show at Zebulon in LA with some friends to see some act in particular, and the person who opened is this multi-instrumentalist named Miles J. And my friends and I were all just stunned because it was the first performance in a while where it was a body experience. Whatever he was playing, however he was playing it, and he's just got this smile on his face the entire time. He's looping, he's playing all of these are instruments, one on top of the other. And I think that's a rare talent, to be able to send a person into their body and feel a vibration through their heart. And there's very little music these days that I experience that way.
Yeah.
And I'm up here anyway a lot.
Yeah, and to get to that level of being absorbed in the person's performance and their sounds and stuff, like I think that should be the goal as a musician.
too.
Is like, in finding how to do that is a whole craft in and of itself, and how you start and how you build and how you finish. So yeah, what a full circle experience to be reading this book and meet the person who wrote the book about themselves. So we're on an LA kick. What else do you have?
Well, the last thing I have is my own book that I wrote. It's a novella called Swimming with Horses.
Tell us about it.
It came out on May 1st. I self-published it. It's a coming-of-age story based on my own life experience as a horse girl, and surrounded by dysfunction and chaos, and navigating that as a young person, while also bonding with these big animals and finding the core of what makes it worthwhile to be a horse girl, perhaps, or to do anything.
And did some things upon reflection surprise you about it?
Writing it? Yeah, for me, it was always about connecting with this big, beautiful animal and having a natural feel. I used to be able to get on any horse and feel intuitively how it wanted to be ridden. So while horses are like the ultimate mirrors of human energy, I would want to mirror them and how each individual horse wanted to be ridden. But it got so convoluted with competition and this militant training and the people involved. Like, horseback riding, jumping is not a team sport. It's you against your friends.
Yeah.
And that creates this competitive personality that feels like really counterintuitive to how I would prefer to be, which is very inclusive and like, hey, there's room for everybody.
Collaborative. Yeah, it seems like those individual sports have a way of messing people up in a way that other sports don't. Tennis, figure skating, horseback riding, ballet.
Yeah.
Yeah, you putting it that way, competing against your friends. Also, we were like a middle-class family, and you're competing against like the heir to the Levi Strauss fortune and stuff. And so it didn't, there was like a weird, you and Trav, our brother, wrote a very funny script mocking it years ago that was like so spot on. But
which is fun. And I guess that's part of it, is like, if you write something that's based on a life experience that was admittedly traumatic and formative, it's a catharsis.
Did
and
you
it's a
find
way
writing this book cathartic?
Yeah, and also like activating.
Yeah.
Just like why am I doing this? But I felt compelled to do it in the same way like you go through any sort of somatic therapy. The act of writing it releases it, and it also reframes it in a funny way, and finding like the humanity in every single character. I don't like to villainize anybody in a black and white way or make somebody else a victim. I like for everybody to be well-rounded, not all good, not all bad, and finding what makes it funny in order to cope.
Yeah. And did you find the release part happened?
Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah, for sure.
So you activated yourself, but you worked through, you went through the fires and put it down, and you do feel a sense of resolution to that time.
Somewhat, yeah. Just in controlling the narrative, I think that's like a big part of it is, okay, well, at the time that I experienced this similar set of circumstances, I had no control. I was at the mercy of people who told me what I was going to do or what I wanted to do, or denied certain needs. And now as an adult, I have agency, and I can rewrite things from a place of feeling safe and grounded. And yeah.
And why did you choose a novella as the format to tell the story?
It was initially a short story, and it became longer and longer, but it wasn't going to be long enough to be a book. And I thought, well, I could release this as a novella and eventually have a collection of short stories and put it in there. But
Yeah.
for now, I want to just literally and figuratively release this work in hopes as well that other people might connect to it in some way. If it's just entertainment, if it's like relating directly, then that will make me very happy.
Yeah. Did any other books influence this one? Any other pieces of work?
No, I don't think so, but probably everything I've ever read. Yeah, anything that has like a memoir kind of feel but is like fictionalized, because this is just the bones of an experience and colored in with imagination.
Yeah.
But like trying to find the voice of a 12-year-old girl too, and honor that all the way through was like a fun challenge of
Yeah, and that's why I haven't read it, full disclosure, and it's like for that reason is like grew up next to that 12-year-old girl,
I
and
know.
there's something so activating about that, and also like that was your interior world. And yeah, I don't know, there's something there where I'm like,
I respect that though. Like,
Yeah.
there's a part of me that wants to share it, and another part that's like, I don't want you to have to like walk through that again. You walked through it with me the first time.
Yeah, exactly.
So
And
yeah,
I bought the book.
he bought the book. That's enough.
And I
That's
worked
enough.
on a book proposal a few years ago, a childhood memoir about being a failed child actor. And equally, I don't think you wanted to read it. It's like,
No, it's difficult just having conversations with you about it where you were relaying things that you were writing about. It was activating for me to hear
and
about
you go into
it.
like a protective mode. Yeah. And that's a whole other story and thing. It's interesting. It's interesting how, I mean, you and I have been on this life journey as creatives, and the things we've shared and not shared and stuff. And yeah, it's like a fascinating conversation, but also finding your place in that conversation. And like I guess what I've come to is like, I enjoy hearing the people close to me tell me about their work more than I even do engaging in their work. Cause I want to know what their experience of it is, almost more than I bringing my own subjectivity to their work. Because I know how much my work means to me, and also how little it means compared to my relationships.
That's such a great way of putting it, because I can often conflate my work with my self-worth. And so I've intentionally created like an awareness around that, where as long as I feel seen by the people close to me and can share my experience or the creative ins and outs of what I'm going through, that's more than enough, because then I'm creating work in the hopes that strangers will want to connect with it on their own terms.
Yeah, your work is stranger bait. I was on the phone with my friend David yesterday, and he was telling me about the trials and tribulations of this short film he made. And then he sent it to me, and I really enjoyed it. But I felt so much closer to him hearing about the process of making it than watching it, and watching it was just incidental almost. Just living in a time where there's so much media intake. I think that also skews things too. It's like how much time do we have for media, and what does that media mean to us? And I use the word media callously, but also art and creativity, and
not to be confused with content.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I don't want to add my creativity to the to-do list of those I love.
Yeah.
But I'd rather like connect as humans in the moment.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. And so, yeah, I was actually excited to have you on here as a means
instead of reading
bridging that. Yeah, this is like, hey, in lieu of it, why don't you people who weren't 12 years old 10 years old, read it. But yeah, thanks so much for sharing it.
Yeah,
And
thanks for having me on this wonderful podcast you've created.
yeah, I'm glad to, and glad we got to do this.
One more thing. There's a new book out by this author named Joshua Turek. It's a book of poems called Of Dumb Importance. You can buy it now.
Yeah, it just came out 2 days ago. We're a family of writers,
Yeah.
and not just writers, self-published writers. The best kind.
I didn't have the patience to pitch it to people.
Exactly. And wasn't it so, speaking of cathartic, just moving at your own rhythm
Yeah.
instead of waiting on emails or whatever, or rejections or confirmations? It's to just do it and put it out. I mean, that is a cool part of our day and age, that you kind of can do that.
I did that. Remember, I wrote a book when I was 20, 21.
Yeah, 20 or 21 years old.
And and I self-published it on Lulu. Lulu was the very first self-publishing platform. And I had sent out, at the time you couldn't do email submissions. There was no submittable, nothing like that. So it was still snail mail. And I was so broke at the time that the thought of paying for postage again and again to submit to publishers or agents just overwhelmed me. So I also think I was very sensitive to rejection.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that
Honestly.
book. That book was great.
Thanks.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's just to say, especially in music too, of no, I just made this thing. It's of the moment. I don't feel like waiting for a label to deem it worthy, especially because you sign a thing, then they shelve it for 2 years.
Yeah, I'm an artist. I want to create
patience.
things, share them, and move on to the next thing that I'm creating.
So you don't become clogged and then
clogged
stuck.
by the marketplace.
Yeah.
When the marketplace is dictating your creativity, then you are kind of caged.
You're at the mercy.
Yeah.
So yeah.
All right. Freedom. Yeah, that's the title of this episode, Freedom.
Thanks for tuning in. This has been Turek's Books.
Hang on. Not so fast. Thank you for tuning in.
This has been Turek.
I'm so happy our guest, Britt Warner. Thank you for coming in, and
Thanks
you
for having me.
for listening to another episode of Turek Books, and happy reading out there. Thank you for listening to another episode of Turek Books. Be sure to like, subscribe, thumbs up, any kind of thing that could help us get listened to or watched by more people. We really appreciated having you and hope to see you again next week with a new guest and plenty of books. Take care until then.